So, a warm welcome to the PRME Deans Dialogue. Today, I have the great pleasure of having here with me in the virtual PRME studio, Dean and Professor John Lennon from Glasgow School for Business and Society, located at the Glasgow Caledonian University. A warm welcome to you, John. John, you are the Dean of a large school with more than 5,000 students. And I was very pleased to see when I was doing a little preparation and research for this conversation here today, that actually on the very front of your website, on actually the very first sentence that I read on your website, is sort of states that you support innovation and value the importance of social responsibility. And I think it's fair to say also that your strong support for a number of years, one of your faculty senior lecturer, Alec, Wersun, and his great work, impressive work over a number of years as the chapter chair for the UK Ireland chapter, but also for a number of other important activities in the PRIME community, shows your dedication and your support to PRIME and the UN, as a UN Global Compact initiative for our journey towards more sustainable development and responsible management education. So I would like to invite you to sort of reflect a little bit about your school title, the Glasgow School for Business and Society, and how you work with responsible management education and sustainable development on a daily basis as a dean in your school.
So that name is really to reinforce the institutional aim of a university for the common good. So at a university strategic level across all schools, we have that ethos that this is a university that's about challenging perceptions and access to higher education. It's a university that makes issues of social deprivation, social justice, and social responsibility part of the core. So that name, School for Business and Society, reflects also the mix of subjects. So we want our students to understand the impacts of business on society as much as how businesses perform. In doing that, we have one of our partner departments would be social sciences. And I think that's very important that business is subject to a radical critique from disciplines such as politics, disciplines such as sociology. And it actually makes for a richer student who has a greater analytical and critical ability to look at everything beyond a simple return on investment calculation or beyond the significance of operational profit. So I think the name is circa 2014, so we've been called this for a long time. The way that trickles down, I suppose, is it trickles down into the curriculum, the syllabuses, what the students learn, but also in the direction of research of the institution. So you'll hear many deans and many professors telling you that they have entrepreneurship in their programs, they have innovation, they have social responsibility. We have all of that. But we start, day one, week one, with that idea that you can't separate the operation of business from the climate emergency. You can't separate market capitalism from a fundamentally unequal society. And you can't debate the share price and the stock market without considering the impact on the environment. So I think that's pervasive. I think what I'd say to you about our research approach is that if your research doesn't underpin one of the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, you won't get it funded internally. So it's that clear. If I want to do something on leveraged banking in New York, if it doesn't hit an SDG, or preferably 3 or 4 of them, it won't get funded, it won't get internal approval. So that ethos pervades our research and it pervades our teaching. But it comes through in other ways too, I suppose, in the way we interface with the wider community around the university. And some of the stuff I suppose that I should highlight is that as a university focused on disadvantaged and those coming from tough backgrounds where higher education hasn't been a normal path of development, what we know in Scotland and in the UK is that the deprivation and the life choice issues begin very early on, not at 17 or 18 when they come to us, but right at those early years, 0 to 3, 0 to 5, 0 to 7. Life choices are made then, expectations are built. So we have something called the Caledonian Academy, where we twin with circa 15 schools in the wider Glasgow network, where we have outreach facilities, and we get those students to come into the university to meet lecturers, to sit in on lectures. Some of them actually study for their hires or their standard grades within the university. We have a thing called a higher hub. So we demystify the idea of university, and we start to talk to them at a very young age about aspirations and building hope. You can't wait until they're 18 and hope that somehow there will be a transformation. You must start early on, because that's when the roots of underachievement and the problems in our society begin.
That's such an interesting idea. Can I ask you, how old are these kids when you invite them?
Well, it starts with we have nurseries on campus where we have impact there. But the Caledonian Academy begins from primary onwards and goes into secondary. The ones coming in to be taught on campus tend to be doing their sort of 15, 16-year-old examinations. But they come in, and some of them go on to do exceptionally well. We had a Cambridge entrance in economics last year, who came from very humble backgrounds. And I was sorry to see her go to Cambridge, obviously, but I understand that it's a university as well, and it has achieved some stuff in the past. So, more power to them. But that idea also pervades, as I say, our research. So if you look at what our research centres are identified as, we have a big research centre focused around Muhammad Yunus's work, as an ex-chancellor of the university and banker to the poor. We have a Yunus Centre for Health Economics, probably our most successful centre, that straddles business and the health school. And as you can imagine at the moment, it's very involved in research related to COVID and endemic health issues, which of course usually are linked to poverty and deprivation. Indeed, in Glasgow itself, which is there's a real concentration of COVID, it's because of underlying health conditions in the wider population, which links again to the economic situation. These things are all interrelated, but Eunice is doing interesting work there, and Eunice will teach on our programs of general business, of social innovation, interface with tourism and sustainability. Other centres we have, you can tell by their names. The Scottish Poverty Investigative Research Unit, SPIRO, it's all about challenging the causes for poverty and deprivation in our society. Then we have one on women in the Scottish economy, the WISE Centre, again looking at gender issues, gender budgeting, some very strong colleagues there. And all of these research guys will interface with undergraduate programs and will provide teaching inputs. We have a clear view in my school that as a professor you should be teaching first years, and if you have a problem with that, you could apply for one of those jobs at Oxford or Cambridge, because if you forget who the audience is, if you forget who the customer is, and I'm absolutely opposed to the idea that undergraduates will come in and they'll be taught by doctoral research students. That's simply money saving, and it's not giving the best experience. So it's very important. All members of the senior management group in our school will be teaching, and I'll be teaching first years too, because I think that sends an important signal that you teach postgrads, you teach first years. And I think you can do that and research. I always say to the staff, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. It's kind of what you're paid to do, in my view. But I think back to the research ethos then, and another one we have is one that I run myself, which is the Moffat Centre for Travel and Tourism, which was founded in '99 with industry funding. And it trades like a business. We would turn over maybe £850,000 a year. We'd pay the salaries of all the staff who work in there. We pay our overheads, and with our profit, our retained profit, we fund scholarships for students who want to come and study travel and tourism. Now that, if you like, that's a good example of how we practically challenge the status quo and improve access. Those students who apply for scholarships have to have economic need, academic ability, and a motivation to come and work in. And they are also international. We've had students from Malawi, Kenya, India, all over the world, including Scotland too. And we track them and we see where they end up. And that's a very rewarding part of our ethos too.
I also see that you are number 43 in the 2020 Times Higher Education Social Impact rankings. So how do your students in the school respond to, say, not just the ranking, but also to how they select to what school to join, what school to actually choose? Because there's a lot of possibilities for students today. Could you say something about what you think where that is going into the future?
Yeah, I think it's always great to get a high ranking in a Times Higher Ed publication. I'm realistic about the degree to which somebody looking for an undergraduate career will actually look at Times Higher Ed rankings. You know, maybe I might for my children as a professor in a business school, but actually the kind of kids who come to us, probably it doesn't matter. It's about practical stuff. It's about telling them that, well, if you come to this school, we're going to be doing work with long-term unemployed and business startup. And you're going to work with them and you're going to start to understand that running a business, running a social enterprise, running a third sector operation is another career path for you. And I've been very involved with startup in the last 10 years here. And it's another issue to do with the nature of the student we bring in. We don't have these techie students who are terribly confident that they're going to develop the next piece of software that will make them millions. We have people who think if they get into a corporate career, they're lucky. The idea of starting their own business is so far from the reality of the life they lead. So we do that with mentors. We do that with GCU alumni who've gone out and done it for themselves because they're disposed to our students. They understand our ethos. They come back in and they mentor those students who want to start a small business. And a very interesting thing occurs to me because I'm deeply skeptical about whether students actually read mission statements and value statements. But a third of the startups we get, between 35 and 40%, are social businesses. They're starting businesses not to make a profit, not to make themselves the next Elon Musk, but actually to give back. And we do ask them about that. Why do you do that? And they say, well, that's the ethos of the school, or that's what Muhammad Yunus said to us at graduation, and that made an impression on me. So I'm heartened when I see that. I see that it's rubbing off, and I see that the activities we do, whether it's volunteer work with ethnic minority communities, with migrants, or whether it's the Caledonian Academy interface with schools, I can see that that's having an impact, the syllabus is having an impact, and the research direction of the Institute is having an impact. And if all of those pull together, it's much better than a sort of token, well-meaning professor and researcher in one area at the side of a normal business school. And it's about breathing that life through. And we've been breathing this for a long time, at a time when a lot of people said that that was a stupid name for a school. And why don't you just call it the business school? That nobody else called it school for business and society. but we like to disrupt a little bit, and it seems to fit, to my mind, the kind of route we've taken.
Yes, no, I think that's a very telling way of that you how you frame it here, how you sort of inspire the students actually, and the impact that the school has by inspiring students to take on these social enterprise initiatives for their life career. I think that's very impressive. And sort of talking about the students and the educational programs, one of the things that I hear a lot is that the responsible management education oftentimes in a school comes with the business ethics professor being the one sort of trusted to take on all the ethics at the school for all across all the educational programs. So one of the challenge, and that may be so 15 years ago, but one of the challenge we see today is how do you actually make sure that it's not only the business ethics professor, but it's also across disciplines that faculty and educators are educating our students on these important and urgent local challenges. What do you do, and how do you inspire your faculty?
So in terms of the faculty, I suppose you choose the right ones to begin with. So the new ones that you're recruiting, you have this stuff very clearly in all of your recruitment information and in all of your websites. But I think also that we're looking for, yes, traditional academic results, publications, research, PhDs, but we're also looking for that other element that says, can you appreciate the third sector as well as, the primary, the services, or the manufacturing business? Give us evidence of that. And I think it's very simple for me in that, I'll ask a question about sustainability, and the answer I expect is not just economic, but environmental and social. And if they don't get that, then they're not the fit. But at a kind of pan-university level, I think staff know that volunteering, involvement in outside organisations is the kind of thing that's picked up by our principal, by our senior executive, and seen as exemplary, and people that are living the ethos of Caledonian and the University for the Common Good. So whether it's generating scholarships, or it's looking at a feasibility study for a new resort and recognizing the environmental impact of such a tourism resort on a destination, its people, its culture, its wider environment. I suppose it's about building that in. And I don't think the students need much pushing. They're genuinely quite interested in this. They're turned on to this wider debate about impacts. And I think particularly our younger staff who've come in because of this reasoning are the people who are really driving this agenda. And I've been very keen to change the kind of age profile of the school. I've got a lot of older white males in really senior positions, and we've just managed to shift the gender balance, but we're also moving the age demographic down, because if there is hope, it's probably amongst the youth, I always think. Praise the young and they will prosper.
Yes. No, thank you very much for this. Also, to have a balanced gender, but also a balanced generation in a faculty, I think is something we also hear a lot. Well, I would like to ask you here towards. Have a couple of questions left for you, and one of them is: I know that you are still an active researcher yourself, and engaged in reading and writing. But maybe you can recommend one of the readings that you are engaged in these moments. Do you have a good read for us to inspire?
Yeah, I mean, there's an obvious one and then a less obvious one. They're at the side of my bed, so I pulled them down. So old-fashioned books, you remember this?
Yeah, I do remember.
So this is a very influential book which is on our reading list at the moment. Unfortunately, Colin went to Oxford, but we won't hold that against him. He didn't come from Caledonian University. But that's a real...
Prosperity
by Colin Mayer. Yeah, he's an Oxford University professor. And it really is the idea that better businesses are about those businesses that are ethically, environmentally motivated to do more good. And I suppose it's puts the nail in the coffin of some of the more, how shall I say, it's the end of Milton Friedman's ethos for me, and it's the recognition that you understand business by looking at it from a prism of many angles, not just a pure one of economic gain. I think the other one I'm really interested in is this, which is the age of surveillance capitalism. And this was a Barack Obama recommendation, one of his reads for 2019. Zupoff is the author here. And this is really looking at the new currency and the new values which are inherent in data and information, and how critically certain large tech firms are able to data mine in an almost Wild West style and hoover up data and knowledge, which suddenly has a commodity value. And this interconnected house we have, where our fridge can tell us what groceries we lack, this is not innocent or subtle. This data is being centralized, is being collated, and it's being used for all sorts of purposes and processes. And that's changing the nature of value in our economy and creating new values. So it's very, what's the word? It's very challenging, it's very disruptive, but it's kind of stripping away all of the glamour around the rise of some of those tech giants and communication ability that we all enjoy now, limitless access. So I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think Zupoff, Shoshana Zupoff's book is a really well-researched and deep look into the changing nature of information as a commodity in our society.
Well, thank you very much for these two recommendations. I'll put them on the Dean's readings list on our website. And thank you also for giving a few words with why you find these two books so valuable for us as students and as educators. John, can I just ask you a last question here before we conclude this session? And this Prime Deans Dialogue, and if I may say, you have sort of a wonderful name that reminds me of the song by another man by the same name, and the song called Imagine. So I would like to ask you the sort of maybe a little grand question here towards the end, but something that we've also briefly touched upon when we met to prepare this dialogue. How do you imagine the ideal business school of the future?
It is interesting because we're in a time when all of our traditional teaching models have changed, and we talked about an online university for the last 15 years. We all looked at the University of Phoenix in the US, and we all said we had online programs. This is the correction that we've faced now. We've now had to jump online. We've had to work very hard to make that medium interactive and inclusive and engaging in a way that, frankly, we were never doing before. We were paying lip service to it in so many, not just my own institute, but elsewhere. So I think now the way we communicate has changed. We've been intrigued by when we ballot students and ask them, do they want small group teaching still on campus? They always say yes, and they do come in masks, socially distancing. They still want that social interaction and engagement outside of lockdown when we had some movement possible. So I do think there is a place still for the physical institution, but I think increasingly I'm looking at it's going to be a mixed mode in terms of delivery. I also think we're going to get better at this idea of a university of the seventh age or university for life, and getting away from an over-reliance on rather young, inexperienced graduates coming in to study for their first degrees. We, as an access university, have always welcomed women returners, older people coming back into the labour market. We just gave a PhD to a guy who I think was 86 when he finished his PhD. I think he's the oldest PhD in Scotland, because I was just congratulating him. That's the kind of university I would like to see, that is full-time, part-time, that is distance learning, that is flexible, that is engaging with schools at one end, but is engaging with the community and industry at the other. And I mean, I paint a very social picture here. I mean, we do a lot of commercial work. We're monitoring impacts of COVID on the economy and business at the moment very closely, but we can never take our eye off how that impacts further down the line. But okay, so many insolvencies means growing unemployment, means food poverty and child poverty. So that the business element links back to the poverty research units. So it's a vertically and horizontally integrated school of the future, where the crossover into things like health, engineering, technology will be much less demarcated. And I've always been intrigued that in industries like tourism, where we didn't really see much product innovation for a long time, if you think about it, Jesus was born in a stable because of an overbooking problem in Jerusalem. You know, you always overbook hotels because you get no-shows. That hasn't changed in 2,000 years. The thing that changed the tourism industry was tech. Airbnb came along in the model for putting supply and demand together without owning assets, and it blew it apart. So I think if we don't merge those subject areas and those disciplines, as business schools will be bereft. You see, the technologists can come along, look at a sleepy sector and change it radically. So the vertical and horizontal integration has to be across subjects as well. And you know, it's increasingly the way I find my own reading going, moving back into history or into sociology, while maintaining an interest in finance and performance of stock markets, etc. That's a long, rambling answer. Sorry.
No, thank you very much for this long answer here to the as the last response here, and thank you very much, Dean, Professor John Lennon, Glasgow School for Business and Society. Thank you so much. A warm thank you from me for participating, taking the time to engage in the Prime's Dean Dialogue series here. It has been a truly inspirational journey through what you do at the school itself, but also your reflections about how do we engage business schools in a forward-looking manner into the future. Thank you so much for reflecting and imagining here with us.